Greetings. Glory to God on the highest, and on earth, peace to people of good will. Now, as some of you know, I have a video titled, What is Ron Dalton's Haplogroup? And then sometime after that, I put out another video asking, What is Divine Prospect's Haplogroup? And I'll link to both those videos in the description for anyone who wants to watch them. But for this brief video, I think it's worthwhile to ask, what is We Woke Now's haplogroup, right? What haplogroup does our friend, the good doctor who runs the We Woke Now channel, have? And this seemed like an auspicious time to explore that question, as just today our friend put up this post declaring that being an Israelite is a bloodline. And that certainly inspires me to ask, which bloodline does our friend have in mind? Now, for what it's worth, in the past, the good doctor has been pretty clearly in favor of a patrilineal definition of Israelite. For example, listen to this clip and fair use.
So according to the scriptures, the lineage of a child is determined by the father. And this is what I just posted in the comment section in the chat. Numbers chapter 1, verse 2. And Yahweh spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel after their families by the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. All right. The house of their fathers.
Okay. So from that, it seems clear that at least at that time, our friend was still entertaining a patrilineal definition of Israelite. So it might be worthwhile to inquire about his own paternal haplogroup. And as luck would have it, a few months ago, he made some allusions to what his haplogroup might be during an appearance on the Berean Scholar channel. And I want to play two brief clips from that show, which came about 9 minutes apart, as our friend didn't come right out and say what his precise haplogroup is, but he did make a couple of allusions which seem to have a certain collective implication. So here, consider this first clip, which came a little over 18 and a half minutes into the show, and listen to how he says his haplogroup falls under E1b. Fair use.
Highlighting that my Y haplogroup is E1, E1b. So that is also known to be associated with Northeast Africa, which today they refer to as the Middle East.
Okay, so his haplogroup falls under E1b. Now, I imagine many who hear that would guess that he means E1b1a, right? However, at around the 28-minute mark of that same show, he gave the impression that that's not the case, that he does not have E1b1a. Now, note here how the host shares that 23andMe connected him to Ramses III. And then listen to how the good doctor replies that such was not the case for him. Fair use.
I found that in my DNA.
Yeah.
Did you find every those in yours too?
Yeah, but mine didn't mention Ramses, but I had pretty much a similar haplogroup for us E.
Okay, so I want us to think about the implications of what was said in those two clips, the collective implications, if you will. First, the host of the We Woke Now channel says his haplogroup falls under E1b. Then, second, the host of the We Woke Now channel says 23andMe did not connect him to Ramses III. And the third premise that I would add in here is that 23andMe apparently connects everyone with E1b1a to Ramses III. Therefore, it seems the implication is that the good doctor has a subclade of E1b, which is not E1b1a. And that leaves one to wonder, what subclade might that be? Now, I recall once coming across a reference to E1b2, which I think is referred to as EP75, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think that's what he had in mind, right? I'm guessing that the intended implication is likely to be that our friend has E1b1b. And that seems noteworthy. Now, some may recall the very positive comments which were put forth when it was revealed that Dante Fortson authentically has a subclade of E1b1b, and more specifically a subclade of EM34, which plausibly has a Levantine origin. And as was covered in my video on Divine Prospect's haplogroup, Divine Prospect claimed to have E1b1b as well, though in his case, I must confess I'm skeptical, as I think he might have simply been trying to get in on those coveted patrilineal Israelite sweepstakes. So with those two bookends, it raises the question, where does that leave us with regards to our friend over at the We Woke Now channel? I think I'm not the only one who might confess that a more cynical part of the mind is tempted to think that he too might be flirting with merely trying to claim E1B1B, right? But either way, maybe he's reluctant because of the implications that could have. For example, if I recall correctly, Stephen Darby was trying to treat E1B1B as a distinctly and necessarily non-Israelite haplogroup. And even if we put that sort of rhetoric aside, it would raise the question of which haplogroup the good doctor would assign to the biblical Jacob and what implications that would have either for himself or for the majority of the African diaspora in the Americas, which has E1B1A. And with that in mind, it's interesting to note again that the good doctor himself has hinted that specifically the King James Version of Joel 3:21 could mean that Israelites who don't descend paternally from Jacob could get their blood, quote-unquote, cleansed. Now, honestly, that raises a question of what makes one an Israelite in the good doctor's view, as that sort of talk seems to amount to a partial jettisoning of a patrilineal definition of Israelite, insofar that that sort of approach implies that there can be Israelites who don't descend paternally from Jacob. But here, consider this clip, for example, in which he treats a patrilineal definition as biblical, yet alludes to a softening of that idea or a temptation to walk it back somewhat. Here, fair use.
So again, I agree, and it's biblical that the lineage is determined by the father. But what happens when you can't find the father? You know, what happens? You know, and so that's why I agree with that. But at the same time, let's be considerate. And this is what, you know, if we're not careful, this is what opens up doors for others to try to pounce and try to say, well, you can't be an Israelite because your DNA says this here, X, Y, and Z. You know, it has some of this inside of it. And that's some of the things that I saw the unconscious community doing last night. They were literally looking at DNA saying, now this proves that you're not an Israelite because you have Caucasian blood in you.
Wow.
And here's another clip from just a few months ago in which he more explicitly invokes some sort of blood cleansing as per Joel 3.
So some of you guys that may try to question, well, you are of your father's seed. Hey, what about when you do your DNA and you find out you have a Caucasian male and on your father's side who contributed to your DNA not being 100% Negro? What are you going to do about that? Or not just a European, but you come back and your DNA has your bloodline has Hamitic people within it, because I guarantee you it does. What are you going to do about that? Or can we now hold you to the same standard and say you are what your father is? Because I see a tribe inside your lineage that are not Israelites. Can we say that now all of a sudden, you know what, you're not an Israelite? That's why I love Joel chapter 3. I think it's verse 27, when it says that Yah is going to cleanse the blood of his people. He understands the conditions that we in.
Okay, I don't know about you, but I find all of that quite interesting. It seems clear that the good doctor wants to lump together people from different paternal lines together, lump them together under the Israelite banner. He wants to lump patrilineal descendants of Jacob and people who don't descend paternally from Jacob under that Israelite banner, which, of course, then undermines a patrilineal definition of Israelite. And I'm not sure if that's done purely out of sympathy for others or if it's done because he intends to appeal to a wider audience, a wider spectrum of potential supporters, if you will, or if something else is motivating that. But whatever the case, it is interesting. Oh, and by the way, on a closing note, I imagine some who might see this video will want to ask what my haplogroup is. And I want to say that I do think it's a fair rule of thumb that any man who talks about the paternal haplogroups of other men should be clear about their own haplogroup. So I'll note, as I shared in my video on Divine Prospects haplogroup, that my haplogroup is RP311, which falls under RM269. Hopefully our friend over at the We Woke Now channel can be just as clear and forthcoming about his own precise subclade. Food for thought. But on that note, I'll close this video here. As always, I welcome any comments, questions, or criticisms. I don't censor anyone here, so feel free to share your thoughts, whether positive or negative. And God bless.